Hello and welcome to Get It Started, Get It Done, the Banyan Security podcast covering the security industry and beyond. In this episode, our host and Banyan's Chief Security Officer, Den Jones, speaks with Julie Smith. Julie is the Executive Director of the Identity Defined Security Alliance and has more than 25 years' experience in technology products and service companies, including extensive experience in the identity and security industries. Den and Julie discuss, among other topics, the importance of vendor-neutral advice and education, the roles of identity and security, and Identity Management Day 2022, which will be held on April 12th. Links for registration are in the description. We hope you enjoyed Den's discussion with Julie Smith.
Hey everybody, welcome to Get It Started, Get It Done with me, your host, Den Jones. And then each show, we've got great guests joining us. And this week, it is Julie Smith from the Identity Defined Security Alliance. We'll let her introduce herself in a minute. And what we want to cover is really the premise behind this, as mentioned before, is how do people get started in whatever their endeavor is? How do they make progress? How do they get it done? And along the way, we'll throw in some sparkly questions. So welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Den. Appreciate you having me on your show.
Thank you. So, hey, Julie, just for the audience, could you explain a little bit about your background and what is the IDSA?
Yeah, sure. So my background, and I guess I'll speak to it specifically in terms of how I got involved with the IDSA. I've been in technology, kind of stumbled into it early on in my career, and ended up after a number of years, which I won't give away, at Ping Identity. And that was in 2008. So that was really my first sort of entry into the whole identity space. I went in as product manager, ended up in product marketing eventually. One of the things that in product marketing and really product management we always struggle with is who's our audience? Like, who are we talking to? Who's the most likely person to buy our technologies? And at the time it was, again, 2008, identities just really sort of exploding because we're having a financial crisis and people are adopting cloud rapidly. And how do they manage access to those cloud applications? And so this idea of who do we talk to? We talk to operations. Do we talk to the IT people? Never were we talking to the security people. And fast forward a little bit, and all of a sudden, now we start to see breaches happening, and they're related to compromised identities. Somebody's bad guys got a hold of a username and password, and this I think starts hitting in around 2015, something like that. We're starting to see the Verizon data breach incident report. Talking about compromised identities as the leading cause of hacking related breaches. So this identity security connection started to hit. I'm still working at Ping Identity at the time. And we're talking just about how do we get the perspective of the security folks? Like, how do we get in the door talking to them? And so that kind of is what started my identity security connection thought. I took some time off, went and traveled for a bit, had a good time, and then came back and worked for a big company based here in Denver, Colorado, called Optiv, which was all about security. Not much about identity. And so now I'm kind of the flip side. And as worlds have a tendency to collide, I came into a role where we were working with Ping Identity on basically what it was an integration program. And so Ping was working on this concept called Identity Defined Security, pulled together some partners, said, hey, this is something we really ought to try and focus on. It's a problem. Security people really need to know more about identity and the risks that are out there. People like you, Den, and that's how I got involved in something called the Identity Defined Security Alliance, which at the time was, I would say, kind of an exclusive club. And then stayed involved with it for a couple of years, and we established a board. We invited more vendors into the club. Some of those competed with Ping, and in late 2018, early 2019, we decided to spin it out as its own entity, and really elevate it up to a very vendor neutral, educational trade association, if you will, trying to provide lots of great research, vendor neutral advice, and again, just kind of staying on this theme of how do we get identity people, or security people, excuse me, more in tune with the risks of identity related breaches. That was a lot of words,
Awesome.
wasn't it?
Yeah. But that's awesome. And I think if I recall right, you and I met round about 2018 at Identiverse in Boston, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think mutual friend, maybe Stephen Lee, put us in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Stephen was on our board, and he said, "Hey, you got to meet this guy, Den. He's doing some cool stuff," and it ties in exactly with what sort of the mission of the IDSA is. And he's a character, has a great personality, would definitely be somebody that could help contribute and spread the word.
Yeah. And Stephen is yeah, I'm still talking with him today. He's a great guy. And then what do you remember from our meeting the first time? I seem to remember there was alcohol involved, a bit of baseball, and a
Yep.
very nervous Julie.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first time we met face to face was probably in the bar at the restaurant, or at the conference where the hotel where the
Mm.
conference was being, if I remember right. So that was early in the afternoon. And that was our first face to face meeting. We sat down and had a drink. And then as those conferences go, there was a baseball game that night. I couldn't tell you who the Red Sox played. I know that it was at Fenway. I know the Red Sox played somebody else, and we ended up crossing paths, I think, at an event at Fenway that night, where I was a little concerned about what your condition might be, because I believe our session was the next morning at like 8 a.m.,
Yeah, it
if I'm not
was.
mistaken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was early. I
Yeah,
remember that.
it was a late night, and it was going to be an early morning. And here's this guy that I've just met who seems to be the life of the party, we'll call you. Knows everybody, chatting everybody up, having a good time, and yeah, that made me a little bit nervous about what 8 a.m. was going to look like the next morning for our
Yeah.
session.
And then I do recall a little bit of a practical joke the next morning where you were wondering where I was, and one of my colleagues kind of came up and I think was asking you if you'd even seen me, and he was making it out that I was missing in action.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, and I think there might have even have been a text message from you as well. Like, I'm still, it's like, 7:45. Hey, I'm still like 20 minutes away from the conference. I should be there. What room were we in again? And I think you were just pretty much out in the hall. But yeah, I have a tendency to get a little anxious on things like that, and you were feeding into that anxiety for sure.
Yeah, that was the plan. I mean, I think it was yeah, it's fun for me because I tapped into you being really nervous while we did the baseball game, and the next morning we were having coffee and walking towards the conference. And I just remember saying to my colleague, I'm like, oh, we should play a bit of a joke on Julie here because I know she's really anxious on this. Um, and we were literally
Thanks,
outside the
Jen.
room.
Thanks.
But I do remember. I remember the talk went very well. I remember we had some good audience participation, and people were coming up to us afterwards. And so from that perspective, I don't think they suspected for 1 minute what happened the night before. I mean, I don't think the audience knew that.
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't. Actually, the interesting thing about that conference, right? So that's 2018. We had just established a board for the IDSA, and we were, trying to find our way. And the way that session went down, so you guys did an awesome job. I was nervous because I always am. You guys did an awesome job. And then after the fact, there was a group of practitioners huddled around saying, hey, can you show me what you guys are doing? And that was the catalyst for, and it's a hard thing to do, but that was the catalyst for, can we create an online community? Is there a way for us to take that interaction, right, that sharing, and kind of the show and tell, and hey, this is how we did it, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't. Could we take that online and turn it into kind of an online community? And I know you and I have had lots of conversations about how to do this. It's way harder.
It's way
Than
harder.
it's so hard. I think we're making progress, but yeah, it's definitely a hard thing to do. But that was just, you're right. I mean, after that whole session, it was amazing because you had a line, I think, behind you wanting to better understand what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, I don't think I had the line. I think Carlos, he had the line.
Well,
They wanted to talk to the smart one, not the guy that knows how to use PowerPoint. They wanted to know how zero trust was really done, as opposed to how it was done on a slide.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, and it's funny. So we actually met people from Cisco, and a company that I later joined, and then we deployed zero trust again at Cisco with many of the people that we had met, and across that team. So yeah, we had some great experiences between the Adobe experience, and then we went to Cisco and done the same experience there. Different technology, but I think, and this is one thing about the IDSA, right? You're trying to look at it in a way that's vendor neutral and vendor agnostic, and you can say, look, there's principles behind these things, and some of these vendors, they are interchangeable. But the biggest thing that I was always trying to tell people as well, you've already got investments. You don't embark down a path and say, well, I want to deliver this outcome, but then suddenly say, and I'd like to rip out the 3 things I just bought last year. Like that's
Yeah.
not your goal. So as part of like the IDSA, what would you say? Like, what would you say is the pitch when you're talking to vendors who want to join the IDSA? What would you say the pitch is that you usually use for those guys?
To the vendors, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the vendor neutrality. It's because I think that's a good thing. I think customers want that vendor neutrality, right? I think they want the
Hmm.
advice that is not grounded in, I'm trying to sell you this widget, right? I think so. I talk about vendors are all about leads, especially when I'm talking to it's interesting when I'm talking to the marketing folks within a potential member company. It's all about the leads. How is this going to generate leads for me? And that's a hard thing to answer, although we've done some things to try and do that and provide that benefit back to the vendor company. Because this is really not about that. This is about a thought leadership. It's about education. It's about making their customer base smarter. And so when I talk to more the thought leader or the strategy folks inside the vendors, they totally get that, right?
Hmm.
They are coming from it from that perspective. We want our customers to be smarter about this. We want to basically have IDSA help reduce our sales cycle and indirectly send customers to us for our technologies. But at the end of the day, it's about helping them solve problems regardless of how they get that done. And that's why you're so valuable in this, right? Just because what you mentioned a minute ago, it's all about not necessarily the pieces and parts you put together to get something done, but what is it you're trying to do and what's the business value it's going to provide back to the organization. And then, can we do it with what we have? That should absolutely be the number one way we achieve our goals.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I always think of it like we vendors always want to get sales, right? So they're in business to make money. But the reality is, and this is the first time I've been on this side of the house. I was always a customer. So I joined Banyan. Now I'm on the what we'll call the dark side.
Yeah,
And
right.
I'm sitting there listening to the sales guys and the marketing people and SQLs and other QLs, and I'm QL'd out really. And at the end of it, I'm like, so it's qualified lead. I'm like, I don't know if I care about that. What I really care about as a practitioner and what I cared about as a customer is I really want to help raise the bar in the education. I would love people, and I think you hit the nail on the head. If you can get customers the minute they start working with you, they already know enough about the market, they know enough about the integrations because, you know, if you're a zero trust company like Banyan, well, that's cool. But the reality is we're not an island. You know, we have to integrate with the Oktas. We might integrate with the CyberArks, the SailPoints, the whomever. You know, and it shouldn't matter if it's Ping Identity or if it's Okta or if it's Duo. We should still have a way to work with your identity provider of choice. So I'd love to be in a situation where vendors invest the partnership here with the IDSA with the thinking that it's all about education and it's all about making sure our customers they're smarter, they ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Because we meet so many customers, and I know this when I would talk to vendors before. Like, if I'm not asking the right questions, why don't you educate me on what the right question is? But ideally for me and the team, we do research first. We understand what good questions look like before you go waste the time of any of the vendors because I don't want to speak to 10 vendors if I should have learned that 8 don't do it already. Um, and a lot of that information's out there. So that's pretty cool. Now, um, I was fortunate enough to be invited and joined the customer advisory board. So when you've got people on the customer advisory board, what's the expectation for those people?
Yeah, so they're busy. That's the one thing I think. I mean, I knew that going into it, but I don't know that I knew to what extent they were busy. So I think the way it's turned out and the original intent are maybe a little bit different. I had hoped that now you're an exception. I mean, in lots of ways, Den, let's be honest, but
Some
you're
sometimes.
you're an exception in that you are able to roll up your sleeves and spend time and get your hands dirty and kind of help invent some of the advice, if you will, that we're creating. And so I think that was my original vision. And there are definitely some that, you know, given what's going on in their world at any given time, that have dedicated sort of that roll up the sleeve, hands on. Um, so that's one way that I try and use the customer advisory board. And again, some are, you know, busier than others. So, you know, get down and really help us. Give us that voice of the customer. Give us that real
Yeah.
perspective on what we're doing. You know, whether it's good or not, or whether it reflects reality or not. So the other side of it is the speaking. I mean, these guys and gals are fabulous at sharing their stories and advocating for us. And so that's really how I've ended up using the customer advisory board in a bigger capacity, is to help spread the word, right? They're
Hmm.
all, you know, executives, they're smart, articulate. And so, just like with Identity Management Day coming up, there's a number of them that are participating in various sessions during the virtual conference. And you'll see, you know, if you attend, which hopefully you'll register, you'll see that these are super smart people and they're very passionate about security and securing their organizations, but also about the role of identity. So they kind of fit directly with the charter, but they all have more of a security bent, which is, I think, really important. And sometimes the identity people talk in an echo chamber a little bit. And so, really, what we're trying to do is get more voices talking about that intersection of identity and security, and having leaders in the security world is one way that we've done it, and through the customer advisory board. So it's been awesome.
Yeah.
It's a great group of people, and yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. I know in my case, it's almost like there's been times would have been engaged, and then times would have done the best Houdini act and have been gone. And I
Yeah.
know that that always really depends on, you know, the change in your circumstances. I changed jobs. I took on a new role. I took on a big role, and at that point, you know, I've done a disappearing act. And I think most of the people that get involved from the customer side, it's like that, you know, because you have a day job. So the intention and the desire is you want to help, be helpful, and get involved. But the reality is you're grabbing another slice of time to participate. Um, I'm really fortunate now, as in the role I have right now, that I'm enabled to get a little bit more involved than I did in my last role. And you know, that's a bit of a blessing for me, because ultimately, you know, getting to speak to more practitioners, and you touched on one point, which is identity is like it's identity is one piece of the puzzle. And even within the IAM space, whether it's privileged identity, identity management and IGA, or whether it's directory services, authentication, you know, privilege goes to bastion hosts. How do these things, you know, then tie back into your remote access solution? Like all of these things, they all intersect. But then you get into like cloud security and how are we dealing with, you know, servers, compute, and application security. So it all intersects. And I think, you know, the things I've learned over the years, when I ran enterprise security teams, it wasn't just identity. Identity was one team of many
Yeah.
teams. Um, and a compromise doesn't occur then just suddenly sit in one stack, right? As you mentioned, years ago, people were like compromises were like network level attacks. And really they're identity level attacks and they're social engineering and they're phishing. And then they're going to start to move laterally. And ultimately for us, I think of identity as now being we're at the front line of a lot of the security attacks. So it's really important more now than ever. Now, here's a couple of things. So when you think of the success of IDSA, and what is the future of the IDSA look like? Where do you see the IDSA evolving, and what would you think done looks like?
Hmm. It's a good question. The cheeky answer to that is, well, there's no more identity related attacks, right? So the research that we do, that the last one that says 79% of organizations have suffered an identity related breach, that number goes to zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't
Or
that be
close
nice,
to,
right?
right? Wouldn't that be
Or
nice? Yeah.
close to it, yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, I don't know that I have a solid answer for done. I will say that we've made some changes this year to try and bring more of the voice of the customer into what we do. And that's through some new membership types. So we have been a very vendor driven organization in the past in terms of funding and contribution and that kind of thing. And so we just introduced this year, January, two new membership types that are focused on bringing practitioners more actively involved in what we do. And the benefit to them is they get to spend time talking with incredibly smart people and working on best practices and advice that can then hopefully be used by everyone. But they also can get CPE credits towards their ISC squared CISSP certification. And if they want to get their brand out there, if they want to network, if they want to speak, they have an opportunity to do that as well. So I think at least the next sort of near term step is to really get more people active and involved, and more people that are actually in the trenches doing it. And so if the bigger the organization gets, the more resources we have, it just kind of continues to pile on. And if maybe at some point in time there is a certification program specifically around identity related security, identity defined security, that would be uh, a fantastic addition in the future. But I think at this point we still have work to do, because there's still breaches happening that, in
Yeah.
my opinion, are related to really dumb things that
Yeah.
organizations haven't put in place.
Yeah. A lot of
So
the
I think there's
basics. Yeah.
still, yeah, I think there's still work to do.
Yeah, and I think IDSA right now, correct, keep me honest here, but I think it's predominantly US based right now, right? I mean, most of the people that participate are based in the US. I'm not sure if there's anyone outside of the US, but I can imagine IDSA growing to having, global presence where we've got, IDSA in Europe and IDSA in Asia and around the world, and having an organization where the reach is broader. because I know the internet, you can post and publish online and it reaches
Right.
broad, but the ability for people to come together as work groups and meetups and things like that is pretty restricted to whatever the pockets of the vendor members or the customer practitioners, whatever we are. And as you say, right, getting more people involved, more engaged.
Yeah.
I could see there being a lot of opportunity there. Um, so yeah, that would be pretty cool. And like you say, I once said to a previous boss, almost eliminate lateral movement. I would never have the guts to turn around and say totally eliminate. And I
Yeah.
think for us with the identity related breaches, if we're not in the top 10 of the reasons, I think that would be a win, right? I mean, just I
Yeah.
would take that in a heartbeat. So yeah,
Yeah. Isolate too, right? Yeah. So to your point, right? They get in, but they can't do anything. And it's all
yeah,
because we know who they are and we know that they're doing bad things. So we've shut them down to a point where they're done and they move on to something else.
yeah, exactly. So here's so one of the things is you've gone through this journey. What would you say has been one of the proudest moments of your career, and what was the lesson you learned from that?
Oh wow. You didn't tell me you were gonna ask me that question. I would say last year was the first identity management day. We had one of our vendor companies had this idea. We need this day of awareness. We need everybody to focus on this problem. Now, some people would say you need to focus on it every day, but why not, try and rally the community to one day and share best practices? And so I think last year, the first identity management day was way bigger and more people involved than than I ever imagined, given it was the first one. And we pulled it together. I think the lessons learned out of that is this is a big problem, and there's people that you don't think about that are paying attention to it, or wanting to advocate or prioritizing it in their organizations that you may not have even thought about. And a lot of lessons learned coming into this year about how do we do a better job of getting more people involved, how do we make it bigger, how do we provide more education. And so this year's identity management day, and just in the last 2 weeks, we turned what was going to be a series of sessions throughout the day into a true virtual conference. And so super excited about that.
Awesome.
On April 12th, we've got different topics with an amazing, that's the other interesting thing. I think one lesson, not a lesson learned, but maybe something that surprised me through this whole thing, is the number of people that are willing to contribute to something like this. And then the connections that I've been able to make and that the organization has been able to make in the last couple of years. The lineup of speakers is phenomenal, and I'm super excited about Identity Management Day.
Yeah,
So
it's looking good. And yeah, last year I remember it was such a great success, and everyone's all nervous prior to the build up. Will it be great, or will it just be like this kind of fizzled out thing that you kind of wish you never done, right? But I kind of
right,
look at it like it's like holy shit, this actually worked. And
yeah,
kudos to you and the team. And I think this year we'll hopefully see momentum based on last year's event. Um, and we're recording the podcast before Identity Management Day, and we expect this to be out probably the week before Identity Management Day. So, for anyone who's not registered or doesn't see anything or hasn't seen about it or heard about it, we'll be putting some links in as part of the publication of the broadcast. But here's a dreamy based question, Julie. So we've been doing COVID, so everything's virtual. So identity management year three that day, do you see that being virtual or do you see that being physical in person?
no,
There's
that's
an aspirational goal, right?
that is an aspirational goal. It's possible next year or the year after we could do it an in-person event. Our partner, National Cybersecurity Alliance, they're actually doing something that just happened to fall on April 12th, an in-person event in Phoenix. So and it's an education-based event down there. So maybe next year, maybe the year after that, we could partner together the two organizations and turn this into a face-to-face event. That would be
Yeah.
fantastic. That's a lot of work. That's a ton of work.
That's a
Putting
ton
on
of work.
putting on a virtual conference is a lot of work. Putting on an in-person conference, it's just But
That's it.
that'd be a great goal. I love it. Let's put it out there.
That would be a great goal, and I think you may have a lot of vendor members that would love to sponsor such an event. So I don't see why it couldn't be funded, I guess. So maybe we need to go back to those vendor members and see if they're interested in such a fun objective.
We
So
should start now. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, let's start planting that seed. We'll become good gardeners. Okay, so we started off with the proudest one. So let's jump into a horror story. What would you say is the worst thing that happened in your career?
In
And
my
what did you learn
career.
from that? Yeah.
Oh man. In my career, in my identity career.
I'd say your whole career. I mean, I could tell you, I'd done service management once for like 6 or 7 years, and I'm not sure who was punishing me or why, but that was a tough gig.
Yeah. I went to work with some friends and friends that I had met. I was with Arthur Anderson for the first 10 years of my career. And I went to work for a company with some buddies, which was great until it wasn't. Right? Until, the people that I was tight with and who had brought me in were had basically had a falling out with the leadership of the organization. And so as soon as that person lost favor, all of us were basically had the black mark on us because we were
Mm,
brought in. And so we all got ousted. The unfortunate part was that it happened in July of 2001. And normally I would have been relatively confident I could find a job kind of quickly, but 2 months later, the entire world kind of went a completely different direction. So I was out of work for a year, just
wow.
because nobody was hiring during that time. I played a lot of golf. I went to the gym a lot. um, I stressed a lot. Yeah. So I think that was probably the worst time in my career. Um, and it was a long stretch.
Yeah, I remember those days, and working in a company where we were starting to do layoffs, and you're always like cutting costs and trying to save money here and there, and it was never fun. So I totally remember, like, in the Bay Area alone, I can't remember, like, in 2001, maybe 200,000 people suddenly, like, on the streets looking for work. I mean,
Yeah.
it was pretty the virtual streets because they were using computers, but
Right.
it was really, really tough times. But hey, glad you've moved on from there. Now, so let's jump into this. So then you get another job and you decide you're going to celebrate your newfound job that you just got. What's the beverage of choice?
Uh, Wine for sure. And I don't discriminate. So, open with a bottle of sparkling because that's what you're supposed to do when you're celebrating, right? But
Yeah,
then probably move into a nice Pinot after that.
awesome. Yeah, I
California Pinot is my favorite, I would say, because Oregon and French. I think Oregon, no diss on Oregon or anything. There are some good ones there, but they're not as hardy, they're not as robust, I think, as the California Pinots.
awesome. Yeah, I would usually start with sparkling if I'm going to celebrate, but then probably quickly I'm jumping into some reds, and then probably some gin, and
Ooh.
then maybe more gin, and sometimes some more gin there, and eventually ends up like the bottle there, where it becomes like a candle holder. Um, and I don't think that bottle was opened and finished in one night, but maybe a couple of nights. I don't know. So I don't
Yeah,
remember actually. I don't remember the
right.
opening and the finishing for some reason. Um,
Well, and after a year of being out of work, there's a high likelihood that there would have been multiple bottles of wine consumed that night.
I can imagine. So one thing. So you mentioned going to the gym and stuff. Yeah. So when you're not working, golfing, gym. So are those two of the favorite sports? And then I remember earlier you said travel. So
Yeah.
what do you do for the rest and relaxation?
Yeah, cycling, you throw cycling in there. I at one point in my, uh, I was gonna say in my early career, my early athletic career, I was into triathlons for a little while. I had to leave that behind, and now just it's about cycling. But that would be my other one. I think gym and cycling, and I'm a hiker. I'm a skier. I live in Colorado, so I do all the ings, right?
Yeah.
Skiing, hiking, cycling, all that kind of stuff.
Brilliant.
Travel, yeah, I love to travel. I'm actually itching to get somewhere, but that I took some time off in between leaving Ping and ending up at Optiv, and I was in Patagonia, again, and it's all active, right? So it kind of goes back to the ing in me. Hiking down in Patagonia. I was in South Africa. I don't know if safari ing is a is an
No, you
ing
can add an
term.
ing there. Drink, and then there's drinking. That's got an
There's
ing.
drinking for sure in South Africa. Yeah, yeah. Spent a little time in St. Thomas, and probably the craziest place I've been in my traveling is Bhutan, which is amazing.
Mm.
If anybody has an opportunity to visit the tiny little country that's sort of nestled between India and Nepal and Tibet, amazing, amazing place.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna say I can't wait to travel again, but I've done quite a bit of traveling already for work, but I can't wait to travel for some pleasure and, some vacation time. So that is definitely on the cards sometime soon. So,
What's on your list, Dan? Where would you go? What's on your
well,
list?
I actually I done a trip around Asia in 2000, so I would love to do a trip around Asia. I am going to go back to Europe. I haven't seen family and friends back in Scotland, so I'm hoping to go there this summer. I'm planning on that. Um, and then there are some places in Europe that have not been to, like Santorini. I want to go there. That's probably top of the list right now for Europe. I've done a lot of traveling around Europe before because that's where I'm from, right? So I'm looking forward to it. I I kind of I'm a bit of a workaholic. So the hard thing for me is I want to work. I want to make sure what we're doing at Banyan's great and what my team are doing and what I'm doing is great. And then I suddenly start to think about me. But usually that's like an afterthought. I'm great at preaching work-life balance. I'm great at telling everybody else to go get some like vacation time in or go do some training, and then I rarely think about me. So I got to add me more to that list. So yeah, otherwise at some point it's just all work and no fun. So um, yeah, now as we start to wrap up, I've got a couple of things. One is what would you like the audience to take away, if anything, from our conversation today? What's the one nugget you want to leave everyone with?
Never trust Dan.
Well, that is that not what zero trust is all about?
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I think check out the Identity Defined Security Alliance would be the thing. I mean, especially if your audience is the practitioner community. See what we're up to. If get involved. The more voices we have to amplify back out, I think the better off we'll all be.
Yeah,
So
absolutely, absolutely. And I know for me personally, right? Getting involved with it's opened up several doors, right? As you mentioned earlier, there's opportunities for speaking, writing blog posts, getting involved in panels, contributing,
uh,
and even there's a lot of vendors are writing a lot of things as part of IDSA's work, and then as a customer practitioner, being able to go in there and sanitize and question and say, well, is that really how it happens? And I know that working with a vendor now, where I sit there with our marketing team and our sales team, and I'll sit there and say, yeah, but if I was on the other side of that conversation, I'm the buyer, the person you're trying to sell to, maybe that doesn't sell so well for me, right? I'm not. not interested too much in that angle. So it's always good to kind of have those conversations. Um, it's very bizarre. First time in my career being on the other side of the fence. So I think what I've experienced with the IDSA, it's been a great bunch of people getting to work with and being exposed to. There's been some really cool events and opportunities, and I think of it, from a career building perspective. There's an opportunity to grow your career as part of the involvement. So it's not one thing or the other. So Julie, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a blast getting to catch up. Um, as we wrap up this show, I just want to remind everyone we do have some great guests. So first of all, thank you very much to this great guest, Julie.
Mhm.
Appreciate you being on the show. And the next guest for the episode 4 is one of my good friends, Elvis. And Elvis, as you will hear in episode 4, is not a singer. He's a good friend of mine from the FBI, and he's going to join us. And we can't tell you what we're going to talk about because that's all like government secret stuff. But so the show is either going to be 1 minute long because it's all redacted, or it could be like 1 hour. We don't know. But thank you very much, everybody. Stay tuned, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about Banyan Security and find future episodes of the podcast, please visit us at banyansecurity.io. Special thanks to Urban Punks for providing the music for this episode. You can find their track Summer Silk and all their music at urbanpunks.com.